Hey everyone! Welcome to Reality TV News Update, the place where you never miss a moment from your favorite shows. After 12 weeks of intense competition on Survivor 50 in the hands of the fans, complete with never-before-seen twists like the first ever Blood Moon triple elimination, and game-changing cameos from celebrities like Billie Eilish, Zach Brown, Beast, and Jimmy Fallon, fans are just days away from finally discovering which of the final 5 castaways will walk away with the coveted title of Sole Survivor and the $2 million grand prize that comes with it. However, during the epic 3-hour finale episode on Wednesday, May 20th, the remaining castaways Aubrey Bracco, Jonathan Young, Tiffany Nicole Irvin, Joe Hunter, and Rizzo Velovic will need to survive to additional individual immunity challenges and tribal council ceremonies in order to earn a spot in the Survivor Hall of Fame. If they manage to secure a seat in the final 3, they'll also have to convince the members of the Season 50 jury that they are the castaway most deserving of the prize at Final Tribal Council. With 5 players left in the competition, there are a total of 10 different Final Tribal Council possibilities that occur depending on how Wednesday night's finale plays out. Here's a closer look at each potential showdown and who the jury would likely select as the sole survivor in each instance. Aubrey wins in the event of Joe and Jonathan sitting at the Final Tribal. According to preseason spoilers and leaks, this final 3 is the most likely to actually play out during Wednesday night's finale episode. If this Final Tribal Council showdown does come to be, our guess would be that Tiffany is voted out in 5th place, with Rizzo securing his place in the Final 4 by finally using his not-so-hidden immunity idol. Given the predicted results of preseason fan voting, it seems unlikely that Survivor 50 will feature a final for fire-making challenge to determine the final 3. Aubrey will team up with Joe and Jonathan to try to split the Final Tribal Council votes with the pair's honor and integrity. Alliance members Chrissy Hoffbeck, Benjamin Coach Wade, and Stephanie La Grossa Kendrick, who are on the jury instead. Rizzo will probably be voted out in 4th place for the 2nd season in a row. We predict that Aubrey will receive 8 votes from the assembled jury members in this Final Tribal Council instance, including Dee Valladares, Christian Habitsky, Emily Flippin, Ozzy Lust, Rick Devens, and Siri Fields. Bracco would similarly earn votes from both Rizzo and Tiffany, who would have joined the jury earlier in the finale. Jonathan, by comparison, would likely earn the remaining 3 votes from Chrissy, Coach, and Stephanie, with Joe finishing the competition as a 0-vote finalist. In this instance, Aubrey Bracco becomes the sole survivor of Season 50 in a landslide. If Rizzo, Joe, and Aubrey sit at Final Tribal, Aubrey wins if Riz God somehow replaces Jonathan in the final 3. The outcome remains the same, though with the Final Tribal Council votes distributed a little differently. Aubrey likely still earns votes from Christian, Emily, Rick, and Tiffany, despite the fact that Ozzy and Siri were allied with Rizzo all season long. It seems likely that they'll also select Bracco as the season's eventual winner, particularly given the fact that Rizzo was instrumental in Ozzy's episode 11 Blind Side, and the fact that Ozzy, Siri, and Aubrey have been friends since they all competed on Survivor Game Changers together in 2017. Dee could go either way between Rizzo and Aubrey. Valladares talked a lot about her friendship with Velovic, despite the fact that she and Aubrey were not seen as being particularly close throughout the season. Either way, even if Riz God earns Dee's vote, it would be the only one he receives in this instance. Joe, by comparison, would likely earn the honor and integrity votes that Jonathan earned in the instance above, garnering votes from Chrissy, Coach, Stephanie, and Young himself, who would have joined the jury earlier in the finale in this example. Once again, Bracco would become the sole survivor of Season 50 in this instance, earning at least 7, if not 8, of the 11 total jury votes at Final Tribal Council. If Joe, Aubrey, and Tiffany sit at Final Tribal, Aubrey wins if we replace Rizzo from the above instance with Tiffany. The result likely stays exactly the same. Tiffany receives Dee's vote, while Aubrey retains the votes she would have earned from Christian, Emily, Ozzy, Rick, and Siri. Rizzo's FTC vote would likely also be given to Bracco. Joe would, once again, earn only the 3 votes from his Honor and Integrity Alliance members, Chrissy, Coach, and Stephanie. Aubrey receives 6 votes, beating Joe's 3 and Tiffany's 1 vote from Dee in this Final Tribal Council vote. If Jonathan, Aubrey, and Rizzo sit at Final Tribal, Aubrey wins again. The outcome remains the same if Aubrey joins Rizzo and Jonathan in the final 3. Rizzo potentially scores a single vote from Dee, while Jonathan sweeps up his expected honor and integrity votes from Chrissy, Coach, Stephanie, and Joe. The remaining 6 jury votes Christian, Emily, Ozzy, Rick, Siri, and Tiffany all go to Aubrey in this instance, establishing her, once again, as the sole survivor of Season 50. If Tiffany, Jonathan, and Aubrey sit at Final Tribal, Aubrey wins. Surprise, surprise. Aubrey still wins Season 50 when she sits at Final Tribal Council with Jonathan and Tiffany. Tiffany once again earns Dee's vote, while Jonathan garners votes from Chrissy, Coach, Stephanie, and Joe. Aubrey received the remaining 6 votes from Christian, Emily, Ozzy, Rick, Siri, and Rizzo, resulting in Bracco once again being named the sole survivor of the milestone season. Aubrey wins at Final Tribal if Tiffany, Rizzo, and Aubrey sit together. What happens if both remaining members of the Honor and Integrity Alliance, Joe and Jonathan, are eliminated ahead of Final Tribal Council? Aubrey still wins. This time, however, Aubrey earns nearly every single jury vote, including those from Chrissy, Christian, Stephanie, Emily, Ozzy, Rick, Siri, Joe, and Jonathan. In this instance, we anticipate that Dee would most likely give her final vote to Tiffany, though her decision could be influenced by Rizzo or Aubrey's speeches. Coach, who is more likely to cast his FTC vote for Riz God, is the only jury member who almost certainly will not vote for Aubrey in this case. Either way, even if Tiff and Rizzo are able to earn 1 vote each, Aubrey still wins the season with 9 votes. To cut a long story short, whenever Aubrey Bracco participates in Survivor 50's Final Tribal Council, she wins the competition, receiving the title of sole survivor and a whopping $2 million check. But what if the 4th time Castaway finds herself finishing the competition in 5th or 4th place? Who then prevails? Find out by reading on. Rizzo wins if Rizzo, Joe, and Jonathan sit at the Final Tribal. If Riz God somehow manages to take out Aubrey and Tiffany before earning a spot in the Final Tribal Council, the Season 49 finalist becomes the first returning New Era player to earn the title of sole survivor on an all-star installment of the long-running competition series. While Jonathan would likely sweep all 3 Honor and Integrity votes Chrissy, Coach, and Stephanie in this instance, Riz God likely earns the remaining 8 jury votes from Dee, Christian, Stephanie, Emily, Ozzy, Rick, Siri, Tiffany, and Aubrey. Joe, once again, finishes the season as a 0-vote finalist in this instance. If Joe, Rizzo, and Tiffany sit at Final Tribal, Tiffany wins when we consider the possibility of Joe, Rizzo, and Tiffany serving as the season's final 3 at the Final Tribal Council. Things get dicey. Joe almost certainly receives 4 votes from Chrissy, Coach, Stephanie, and Jonathan in this instance. Tiffany, by comparison, likely earns 4 votes as well from Dee, Emily, Rick, and Aubrey. Rizzo or Tiffany could receive the final 3 jury votes from Ozzy, Siri, and Christian. If Rizzo earns all 3, we'll have the 2nd ever Final Tribal Council tie between Tiff and Joe. Velovic, in this instance, would likely be called in to break the tie, casting his vote for Tiffany, who would then become the sole survivor of Season 50. Tiffany wins if Jonathan, Rizzo, and Tiffany sit at the Final Tribal. The situation remains similar if Jonathan replaces Joe in a Final Tribal Council showdown against Rizzo and Tiffany. Tiff most likely earns votes from Aubrey, Dee, Emily, and Rick, while Jonathan picks up the votes from Chrissy, Coach, Stephanie, and Joe. Once again, Rizzo has the potential to earn 3 votes from Christian, Ozzy, and Siri, but even if he does, his tiebreaker vote would once again select Tiffany Nicole Irvin as the winner of Survivor 50. If Tiffany, Joe, and Jonathan sit at Final Tribal, Tiffany wins finally. If Tiffany finds herself in the Final Tribal Council of the season alongside Joe and Jonathan, the Survivor 46 alum still wins the $2 million grand prize, as was the case in every other instance where both Hunter and Young make it to FTC. Jonathan earns all of the Honor and Integrity votes from Chrissy, Coach, and Stephanie. Meanwhile, Irvin sweeps up the remaining 8 votes from Dee, Christian, Emily, Ozzy, Rick, Siri, and Rizzo. In this case, Joe finishes the season as a 0-vote finalist once more. Aubrey wins Survivor 50 in 6 out of 10 Final Tribal showdowns. Of all 10 possible Final Tribal Council showdowns, Aubrey Bracco wins Survivor 50 in every instance, where she secures a spot in the final 3, regardless of which castaways are sitting next to her. Tiffany wins every showdown in the remaining 4, though she may need Rizzo to break a possible 4-for-3 tie in the cases, where he also makes it to the final 3. Riz God, however, wins the season only if he finds himself in a Final Tribal showdown against Joe and Jonathan. By our predictions, Neither Jonathan nor Joe have any chance of being named the next sole survivor, regardless of which castaways they face off against in final tribal council, only earning jury votes from Chrissy, Coach, Stephanie, and each other in all 10 possible finale outcomes. As the finale of Survivor Season 50 approaches, fans are already debating one question above all others: who can actually win? If they make it to final tribal council, after a season packed with blind sides, idle plays, fractured alliances, and emotional betrayals, the final few castaways all have legitimate cases, but not every combination leads to the same result. The beauty of Survivor has always been that getting to the end is only half the battle. Timing, relationships, strategy, honesty, and sometimes simply having more respect than the people sitting next to you are all necessary for winning the jury. Season 50 has showcased several different styles of gameplay, which makes every possible final tribal council matchup fascinating to analyze. Here's a breakdown of the most likely endgame scenarios and who would probably walk away with the $1 million prize in each showdown. Joe Hunter versus Rick Devens. Cirie Fields. This may be the dream scenario for longtime Survivor fans. It would also likely become one of the most competitive final tribal councils in franchise history. Joe Hunter has engaged in a risk-taking, aggressive, and strategic game. He's won critical immunity challenges at key moments and has often been the driving force behind major votes. His resume is flashy, modern, and easy for jurors to understand. Meanwhile, Rick Devens has once again leaned into the chaotic gameplay style that made him a fan favorite years ago. The jury could give him a lot of respect for his idol hunting, dramatic tribal council performances, and ability to survive when he was a clear target. Then there's Cirie Fields, arguably one of the greatest social players in Survivor history. Cirie's path to the end would almost certainly involve relationship building, subtle manipulation, and emotional intelligence rather than flashy moves. In this matchup, the vote would likely split heavily between Joe and Cirie, with Devens also securing several votes from jurors who value big gameplay. However, Cirie may ultimately prevail due to the tendency of many jurors to reward players who combined emotional trust with strategy. If she reaches the end after surviving such a dangerous season, jurors could see it as the completion of one of Survivor's greatest stories. Projected winner: Cirie Fields 5-3 to vote versus Joe Hunter. Ozzy Lust versus Bracco Aubrey. This combination would represent 3 completely different Survivor philosophies. Ozzy Lust would likely argue physical dominance and survival skills. His challenge performances alone could make him difficult to ignore if he wins multiple immunities late in the game. Aubrey Bracco, on the other hand, represents adaptability and long-term strategic thinking. Aubrey has always excelled at understanding social dynamics, and if she reaches the end, it probably means she successfully maneuvered through several dangerous situations. Control would be at the heart of Joe's argument. Unlike Ozzy, who thrives physically, or Aubrey, who thrives socially, Joe's argument would likely focus on dictating votes and managing alliances. This scenario may ultimately come down to what the jury values more: challenge dominance, strategic control, or social adaptability. Historically, modern Survivor juries tend to favor players who actively shaped the game rather than simply survived it physically. That gives Joe a slight advantage. Ozzy would almost certainly receive votes from jurors who admire loyalty and challenge success, while Aubrey could pull support from strategic thinkers. But Joe's ability to combine visibility with influence may be enough to secure the title. Projected winner: Joe Hunter for 3-1 votes. Cirie Fields versus Aubrey Bracco versus Rick Devens. This would be one of the smartest final tribal councils the show has ever seen. Cirie and Aubrey are both respected strategists, but their approaches differ greatly. Aubrey tends to explain her gameplay analytically, while Cirie often relies on emotional connection and subtle persuasion. Devens would likely enter tribal council as the flashy wildcard. His idle plays and survival instincts would be impossible to ignore, but some jurors might view his game as reactive rather than fully controlled. If the jury prioritizes emotional intelligence and social trust, Cirie becomes the clear favorite. If they prioritize visible strategic moves, Aubrey has a legitimate shot. Devens likely earns admiration, but may struggle to convince jurors he controlled the overall direction of the season. One major factor working in Cirie's favor is narrative. Survivor juries often appreciate legacy moments, and a player finally completing a long journey can influence emotional voting. Projected winner: Cirie Fields 6-0 vote. Rick Devens versus Ozzy Lust versus Joe Hunter. This would be the most old school versus new school Final tribal council imaginable. Ozzy represents classic Survivor values, loyalty, camp life, and physical dominance. Devens represents entertainment, unpredictability, and resilience. Joe represents calculated modern strategy. The jury's composition matters enormously here. If most jurors respect aggressive gameplay, Joe probably wins comfortably. If jurors are bitter toward strategic betrayal, Ozzy becomes more dangerous. Devens could emerge as the compromise candidate if the other to divide the vote. Joe's biggest challenge in this scenario would be explaining betrayals without sounding cold. Devens, meanwhile, has natural charisma that could help him connect emotionally with jurors during questioning. Still, Survivor history suggests that players perceived as controlling the strategic direction usually gain the edge. Projected winner, Joe Hunter 5-1 vote. Aubrey Bracco versus Siri Fields versus Ozzy Lust. This showdown would likely become a debate between social strategy and physical achievement. Ozzy would argue he earned his way to the end through dominance. In challenges, Aubrey would point toward strategic flexibility. Siri would emphasize relationships and influence. Unfortunately for Ozzy, modern juries rarely reward challenge strength alone unless paired with strong strategic agency. That likely leaves Aubrey and Siri competing for the majority of votes. Aubrey's analytical approach may impress some jurors, especially players who value calculated gameplay. However, Siri's legendary ability to make people feel understood and respected could once again become the deciding factor. Many jurors vote emotionally even when they claim to vote strategically. Siri has always mastered that balance better than almost anyone in Survivor history. Projected winner, Siri Fields 5-1 vote. The biggest X factor, jury emotions. One thing that makes Survivor 50 especially unpredictable is how emotional this season has become. Several jurors appear deeply connected to the remaining players, while others seem bitter after blindsides and betrayals. That emotional factor could completely reshape the outcome. A dominant strategist may lose because jurors feel personally hurt. A quieter player could win simply because they managed relationships more carefully. Final tribal council performances also matter enormously. Some players arrive with impressive resumes, but fail to clearly describe their games. With one great speech, others completely alter the jury's perception. After 50 seasons, Survivor is still one of the most compelling reality competitions on television because of this uncertainty. No matter which finalists make it to the end, the final vote could come down to a single answer. One emotional moment or one juror deciding who truly outplayed, outwitted, and outlasted everyone else.